We'll start in a few minutes, so I just want to let you know we're going to be doing lab 1 today. And so if you haven't downloaded the instruction, you can access Canvas and check out lab 1. Let's take a few minutes and download the instructions, look it over. If you need to download, you can also download NetworkMiner. That's part of the first step. Make sure you look at the OS section. So if you're using a Mac, then you want to download it for the Mac. If you're using it for Windows 10, download it for Windows 10. I'll explain what it is, what we're doing today. We'll give another minute for the people to join. So if you missed the lecture section 2 days ago on Tuesday, I posted the Zoom video and I also uploaded the YouTube. I linked the YouTube video to the page. You can find that in the module. The YouTube video contains caption and the Zoom video doesn't have caption, because Zoom uses a third-party captioning and the third-party captioning takes a little while. So, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I think some people will be joining us shortly. This is a small section anyway. So today we are going to use NetworkMiner, and NetworkMiner is a tool that's commonly used for malware evaluation. Like, we can pinpoint where it's coming from, which system it's impacted. A lot of the times you want to utilize an isolated system, and that's explained in the actual document, to really take a look at the traffic and what type of file, what system, what user account in the case where if the users are sharing the system. Now, as part of computer forensic, we have to investigate the incident, especially when the malware is impacting our system and our network. As you know, that ransomware is very prevalent in the actual industry. So a lot of the ransomware is really hitting healthcare and education, or even city and government offices. So part of the job for the forensic investigator is to really determine, right, the assets that's being impacted. And then also from the security standpoint, we want to make sure that we train the people to be aware of the websites that they're accessing, the resources that they're downloading, and then we can control it with the configuration on the security end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into screen share. If you have questions, please, unmute and ask. You can also hold down the space bar and speak. It will unmute while you're holding down the space bar. So this is the lab 1 document. I'm going to minimize this right here real quick. And it starts with giving you the introduction to network forensic analysis tool. There are many tools that are available, and this is an open source one. The creator of the tool, he actually presented at DEF CON. He has his own set of training. If you do look at the website, they have resources and tutorial. And then there are other companies that utilize this tool. So The version that we're using is the free version. And there is a pro version that people would pay for, which has a little bit more bells and whistles. So I just want to give you an overall understanding on how to look at traffic that has been captured. And normally, we would monitor traffic live, but at the same time, when we investigate, we're really reacting to the incident. So we would take a file that consists of captured information, and we would be evaluating that file, and we will write a report on the incident and how we would give the recommendation on to fix the problem. So it tells you here that it is a passive network sniffer. That means that this particular tool, it's gonna listen in on the back, and it can hear, and basically it allows the person who's using the tool to see everything that's going on, very much like Wireshark. And some of you are familiar with that from CIS27 or other classes. Unlike Wireshark, live capturing is a little bit more challenging for NetworkMiner. So I normally recommend that we would use Wireshark to capture the traffic or to monitor the traffic. So it sniffs out all the connection, right? From the router connection, the system connection, the user accessing a certain website. And then we can save that file as a PCAP file, and then we would use that captured file to do the analysis. And NetworkMiner gives you a little bit more details, especially in the malware area. So it tells you here that it's passive. That means it doesn't call back. Some sniffer actually tell, right, whatever it's sniffing, that it is an entity that's looking. So those are active network sniffer, and active network sniffer tends to be less secretive. So sometimes if you want to listen in and you want to take a look at the network traffic, you want a passive scanner, okay? Because there are great tools out there that's active, and that will actually, it calls home, so it tells the other host that that's the system that you're using. And so in the case if we're doing like investigation, we might not want everybody else to know that we're looking, so we want to use a passive one. So in this tool, it's going to tell us the type of operating system, right, each of the system would have, and mostly accurate. Sometimes even on Wireshark and other tools, it will be, close, okay? And then sometimes it has errors, so not every software is going to be perfect. It's going to tell you about the session, what's consisted of that session, is it encrypted, what kind of communication is in that session. So when we saying the session, we mean that that communication that was established in that span of time. So it would actually put the timestamp on there for you, right? Who's responding to who, which host is communicating. And then the host name that pertains to the computer, mostly the computer name. So in a network environment, a lot of the times the administrator would name the system based on, sometime it could be location, sometimes it would be the department, or sometime it will pertain to specific, role or whatever it is. So every company would be a little bit different, but a lot of times it pinpoints back to the PC or the computer name or how that host is being identified. So when we're talking about a router, right, how that router is named, right? Or it could be like a wireless router, or when we're talking about a network appliance, how network appliance is identified in the network. And then open ports. So what do we mean by ports, right? I know this is review for a lot of you that took security classes before, but it might be new information to others. So ports is just a communication, a connection point, whether it's going to be physical, right? Like how you connect your TV with HDMI cable, that connection point where you plug in the HDMI cable can be a port, or it could be a port that is logical, meaning that it's using services through a software and it has a specific protocol. So in some cases, in all cases, the system can have many different ports for many different services. For example, if I'm visiting a website, it uses port 80 for HTTP, a website that's not secure. If I'm visiting a secure website to log into my, bill company, like credit card or bank, right, I would use HTTPS. So that's the protocol, and it would have a different port. So what it's telling you is what type of services is being established through that connection point. And with that traffic, what we can do is we can further look at the and build the artifacts that we need to be establishing a case. And in any circumstance, in anything that's impacting your organization, especially assets, computer, people, your operation, you would consider this as responding to the incident. So as I mentioned, we're going to be using a PCAP file. Either you create this, or in our case, we're going to be downloading it and then opening it to evaluate. It mentioned that it's not a good tool to do live capturing. However, it has the capability, and you would look at the information on how you would turn on your adapter, like your Ethernet, if you're using a cable connection, or if you're using Wi-Fi connection, like a laptop I'm using, then you would have to enable your Wi-Fi. So in this lab, we would evaluate the traffic. But first, you need to install NetworkMiner. Sorry about the typo there. Let me save that. So I broke it down into different sections just to make it less confusing. Part A is only for Windows 10. Part B is for Mac OS. And Part C is for Linux OS. And it's equipped for the general common releases. So if you're using a very unique Linux release, right, then you wanted to look at some reference information to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Otherwise, your installation won't be successful. So if you're using Ubuntu, Fedora, if you're using Arch Linux, if you're using even Kali, right, you can also use this. So an important note that I put here is that in general, anytime that you're doing investigation for forensic, you wanted to have an isolated system. Number one, because you're looking at data and content that's very essential to, could be legal matters, or it needs to be not touched, right? You don't want people to start opening it and accessing it. So a lot of the time we would have a standalone system or an isolated system on the network to really evaluate these cases. Now, malware in particular, the industry, they recommend that you would use Security Onion, which is a Linux OS. And you can find the ISO to create your virtual machine, and in some cases you will find websites that already created the virtual machine for you to be able to run. We are not using Security Onion because that's a whole new different lesson. We are simply using an application on our computer today. So what I did was I included the Security Onion website, and you would want to read the documentation before you start digging into the process of installing and doing all different things. And then you want to take a look at its tool, right, to be able to maximize the capability of that operating system. Now, the case that's given to us is below, okay? So in a network environment, a lot of the times they would have system that will sound off alarm, intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system, firewall, right? And in this case, the alarm has sound off. So, or sometimes they would use software tool to really detect anomalies, things that are not in the normal operation. So the report is given to us, and we are the investigator, that in this segment range, that means that this part of the network, right, 10.8.21.0, and this is an IP address for that set of systems in the network, okay? So what they're saying is the system that contain from this address to this address, there's something happening there. So we have to take a look. So it's kind of like you have a camera, now you're going to zoom in on that section of the network. And pizza vendor, right, they could have many different segments for many different locations and offices. So what we want to do is we want to zoom in on one specific location, one area of the network. And the domain that they're using is techsolutions.info. The domain controller, which is the server, this is the IP for the server, which is pizza vendor. And in some cases, the company could use a cloud company, a third party to host their servers, right? You still have to investigate, and the cloud company, they will step in. So the security requirement for both companies is 50-50. A lot of times contracted, you know, you have, and sometimes more on your end. So you have to really control and investigate your own domain, even you're using their physical server. So cloud just means that we're using somebody else's server physically, and we're putting all our data and resources on there. This address right here is the address of the router. So whenever you see the gateway, that means that it's the entrance to that part of the network. So as soon as the traffic is coming into the network, it's going to hit the gateway first. So that will be 10.8.21.1, and this is an IP version 4 address. Sometime you would see IP version 6, which uses hexadecimal number instead of the octet with decimal number. And each of this number right here that's separated by the period, we call that the octet. So this gives you the 32-bit address. So we know that the router address is the .1. We know that this is the area of the network we're doing. This is the server, okay, address. So what do I mean by that? Think of it like house addresses, right? Like on the street, you will have different addresses for the homes. So now we're zooming in on that street, and this one right here is for the server. This one right here is for the router. And then this address is used to broadcast. So what do we mean by broadcast? We mean that it's gonna send out to all the rest of the system in that segment. So there's one address that's dedicated to broadcast information. It's only gonna send out, it doesn't listen, it doesn't receive back. So it will broadcast information to other system, and the broadcast address is 255. Okay, so we can quickly say that we can eliminate this because traffic is not coming into the .255, but the traffic might be impacting in somewhere in this area, right? It might not be the server, it might not be, it's coming through the router, because in order to send traffic, send requests from your computer to another network on the internet, you have to pass it through the router, the gateway. So the gateway, its job is it's kind of like traffic police, right? It's just making sure that things get passed in and passed out. Okay, so they gave us a screenshot, and this is a case that's used in real life security competition. It was, you know, the PCAP file is from a real life case, right? And real traffic. So what we're doing is we're evaluating a real case. So it gives you the timestamp of what's happening. Okay, so I want you to take a look at this, and I want you to look at the addresses right here. Okay, notice that the port is 80. That means that they're using HTTP, they're using web. okay? And look at this one right here, okay? 10.8.21.163. That's the computer that we need to focus on. That's the system that's part of the network that needs to focus on. Why? Because on the right-hand side, the log tells us that this is the event message. That the file is downloaded via HTTP. So somebody log in, go to a web page, and download something. And that file is either executable or DLL. And often you would find Windows environment malware, right? They are executable file or they are a DLL file, okay? Now, it tells us a little bit more right here, continue events under that. And then on this one, it tells us a possible Trojan, okay? That's coming in as a binary inbound. It's coming in and it's looking that it's hostile, meaning that it's negatively impacting that system, okay? And the security administrator, they set up these policy already to detect, and they're using the tool. So the alarm system is already sounding off and it's kind of giving us the clue. So in your real case, let's say you work as a forensic investigator, you would go and you would get a log from your security systems and taking a look at that log for that snapshot in time. Okay, so it gives you a snapshot of what happened in time. It's kind of like the surveillance system that's tracking who's coming, who's leaving, and what's happening, and who's going to be dangerous, right? So it's telling you that this is a dangerous traffic, and it's coming from the web, and it's impacting one of your computers. Okay, do you have any questions for me so far? So in forensic, it would be useful if you have networking knowledge, right? Like we offer CIS40A, or you would need to have security knowledge, CIS27.
Professor,
Yes.
I have one question. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No.
The first line where it says it's given the source IPA, so that's the actual computer that's being targeted for the
Yeah.
malware document that's requesting like
Yes.
your surf
Hmm.
payload.
So this computer is our computer from Pizza Bender. That's the targeted computer. So this person using that computer, go to this website, the 45.12.4.190, that's a server website, right? So they visited this website via HTTP and they downloaded, okay? Now the 443 right here is the HTTPS. And you see that
Okay,
it's
that's the
using,
secure
yeah,
protocol, right?
that's the secure protocol. So the difference between the HTTP and the HTTPS is that HTTPS has encryption, and often we would use that for authentication to the next level, like we would use it to authenticate to a secure page where we would have, banking or some kind of financial resources, or, private resources. Okay, and as you can see, it's using OpenSSL right here, right? That's why it's with 443. Okay, so in security, it's important to understand your protocol and the type of services that tie with that protocol. And the other classes really is consistent of that, but I just want to give you like the Cliff Note version, right? So that way we can be all on the same page when we're looking at this particular screenshot. So you would acquire the logs and you would take a look at the log, right? And the things that are jumping out at us, we already identify where, oh, there's a malicious thing coming in, inbound right here, and that's it's sending from the web to our system. So that person actually downloaded it. Okay, so we have that. So when you investigate, it's important that you screen capture that log, right? And you also download the log file. So that's part of, building your artifacts. Okay. because that goes all together with your investigation. All right. Any other question? Okay. So if you're using Windows 10, you would visit the page and download. So I'm using Windows, so I'm gonna open that up. If you're using Mac OS, then you would go to download that. Okay. So here, as I explained earlier, right? There are two different versions. We're going to use the free edition one because I don't want you to pay for, our lab. And so in the case of professional use, you would choose this one, and notice that it has a lot of the reporting mechanism. That's mainly the key, is that, it has a lot of the reporting mechanism. It also has some of the additional tool. And then it does the scripting support. And look at the price for that, right? It's pretty steep. So for one license, it's $900. So we're using the free version, so make sure you download. So once you click, you would get an executable file. And then once you have the executable file, you just go through the wizard and keep, just installing, read the message and install, accept the license agreement, and you would be able to install, and it would look something like this. Okay. All right. So now what we can do is, the tool is no good without captured file, like the PCAP file. So we would also need to download the PCAP file. Okay. Now, when it comes in from download, it's a zip folder. Okay, I'm going to show you. I downloaded a bunch of stuff in the last few days for different classes. So, your PCAP file also comes in as a zip folder. So the NetworkMiner 2-5 right here, you can simply right click. I have 7-zip install, but if you don't have 7-zip install, you can just choose extract all. What will happen is it's going to extract it and put it in that download folder location, or you can point it to a certain location where you want to extract. So once you extract it and decompress it, you will be able to get the executable. And once you have the executable, you just run the executable to install. That will be your installation file. Okay. Now for the Mac OS people, the tutorial they have on here is a little bit dated. But what you would do is you would also, I had, put in the instruction for you to, in part B. So I'm gonna come back to that in the part A. And then you would need to use Mono. And Mono is the version that you wanna use is 6.1.0. And you need this Mono in order to utilize the NetworkMiner with Apple, because the program originally, it's written for Microsoft at the assembly level. I dug a little bit deeper and I try to find out like how they created it and so forth. So and you would use your terminal to run your Mono after you download Mono. And then again, you also have to do the download the PCAP file. Okay, so there's some extra step if you use Mac OS, and then differently if you're using Linux, right? You also have to install Mono, and then you have to, run the installation for NetworkMiner. So you can do all of that in terminal. Okay, and in security, Linux is our friend, right? Even though there are some applications that are built in Windows, you have a vast number, many more in Linux. So, because developers, they use Linux, and a lot of the security developer, they write their program for Linux. So I encourage you to be familiar with Linux. Okay. Any question as far as the installation of NetworkMiner? All right, so I have to install. I simply, after I install, I can just search for the application in my Windows search bar, and I can run the executable. So here it is. It's blank, right? It's a blank canvas. We don't have it live captured. So if you have it live captured, it would show right here. Now I'm just going to run through the tab real quick. Actually, no, let's load the PCAP and then I can explain that. That's better. Okay. So after you have installed the NetworkMiner, the free edition, then you would go and you would download the PCAP file. Okay. And it's going to take you to here, and I use this so because they have a bunch of PCAP file and it, you know, it gives you some details. Don't need to download the alert.zip because I already took the screen capture and put it into your document for you. So you don't need to, you only need to download this first one, the pcap.zip. Again, it's a compressed file. So once you download it, you got to extract it to get the actual PCAP file. Okay. So I'll click it and then I'll download it. And what you will see is that it's going to come in as a zip folder, and you simply right click to extract it, or you can use 7-zip and then you can just choose extract file. Okay, I like to use 7-zip so that way I can control a little bit more. Okay, so after you extract it, you would see this little file right here. Okay, and it will put today's date, but because I tested this a few days ago, it shows the date that was downloaded, or 8/21 when they uploaded. Actually, 8/21 when they uploaded. Okay, so make sure that you have the PCAP file. It won't work effectively, right? And when you unzip the PCAP file, if it asks for the password is infected. Okay. So we are going to look at what's in that PCAP file, and we can dive a little bit further and see what's happening at that moment in time. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my NetworkMiner. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and click on File. And then I'm going to, yes.
So my Bitdefense or whatever the stupid virus protection that I have is
You have to disable.
Disable it? Okay.
Yeah. Because it's going to see it as a foreign file. So Chris asked that, you know, sometime you would have a security software that's blocking a certain application or a certain file download, then yeah, you have to disable it for the sake of this, because otherwise it's gonna like, you know, go crazy. Now, PCAP file is not, it doesn't contain the malware, okay? But but in the real cases, like where you actually look at the malware file itself, make sure that you put it into a sandbox. So we would use a virtual machine in an isolated system, and we would evaluate it a little bit more because we don't want it to start infecting the network, right? And infecting our system. Okay, any other questions? All right. So once we have the NetworkMiner downloaded, installed, and open, we're going to go ahead and click File, Open, and make sure we point to our PCAP file that we extracted. Okay, make sure you extracted that first, and the password is infected. Then once you select that file, click Open. and it's going to load. So this gives us the snapshot of the network traffic for, you know, in that segment in time, in at on 8/21, you know, or that date and that time. Okay, it's a lot of information, and this is when, you know, if you're good at networking, if you're good at, you know, some of the looking at, you know, traffic, this is, you know, this is, you can use that knowledge, right? So forensic requires a lot more than just the process and understanding the tool. You have to have some of the networking knowledge, you have to have security knowledge, sometimes hardware knowledge, sometimes software and programming. So you would use your scripting tool, and different things. So, and in security, a lot of times we would have to have those skill sets coming in. Okay, so it tells us that there is this many hosts. And then if you click different tabs, it tells you that there are these many files that were coming through at that time. Okay. Now Sniffer, it will sniff out everybody. Okay. That means that everybody's that's using the network at that time, it's going to sniff it out, right? It doesn't really pinpoint. So we have to really filter it down and look at one or a group of systems. Okay. So
I have another thing. Mine only says 135 files.
135 files. It might drop something. Well, that's good. I don't think that you need, it might not even need all the additional stuff that's coming through. But yeah, if it's the same file that you extracted, not that important. Okay. So it could be that there's one that's hidden. All right. So we don't have any images. There's no crazy messages, especially for this capture. The thing that we want to look at is who is accessing, right? And the credentials that it's finding is who's authenticating at that moment in time. Okay. The cool thing with this tool is this is going to give you that. Wireshark doesn't give you the credential. It only gives you like specific system, OS, IP addresses, and possible encryption information. So this one, it gives you the credential and it tells you that Matthew Jones, okay, using Kerberos, and if you're familiar with protocol, this is a Windows protocol encryption, okay? Also Windows encryption there. So right away that should jump out at us and say that, oh, this user is using a Windows PC, even without looking at that system and the OS, okay? Because the software does tell you that as well. And it's also telling us that Matthew Jones is connected to this server. He authenticated to the domain controller. He authenticated to that server. And that server is Pizza Bender domain controller, pizzabender.com. Okay. And then again here, right? And we can see his client IP right here. And because that's a target. So, you know, and then it tells us the system information here, the computer name, and then it tells us the OS. Okay. And if you scroll down a little bit more, right, it tells you the login timestamp, approximately at what time that he's authenticated. Okay, so it tells us that he authenticated at this time. Okay, then on the other protocol, right? So NTLM does a handshake. So in order to communicate. So when you authenticate to Windows system, right? It goes through the process of handshaking with the domain controller. Like, let's say you authenticated to the school server. When you put in your username and password, right? once your username and password match what they have on the domain controller, it's going to issue you a thing called SAM. So your security profile gets sent down to your system, and it's going to use that profile to tell your system what you can have access to, network resources, files, etc. Okay, so we can see a little bit of what's going on by looking at this. And this right here, right, it tells us that this is, it's an encrypted password. Of course, we know that Kerberos, that's what Windows uses for the encryption, right? And so this is, he issued a password, he authenticated, and then it doesn't really tell us anything about valid login. Next tab is the session tab. All the sessions are happening, right? So, and the correlated protocol, the ports that's being used, and we can also filter that down by putting in the IP addresses that we're looking for, okay? Because it's just tracking everything by IP. So notice that we have a bunch of stuff for 163, okay? That's Matthew Jones' computer, okay? And then we can see the type of services that he's using. Okay. Then here's the domain information. This is on the DNS side, right? So in order to authenticate, they have to the system that Matthew is using, he has to connect to the DNS, and the DNS is gonna bring his, tie that to the domain controller. So DNS and DC, they're always together, okay? And DNS, it's also connecting to the system itself, not necessarily to the user, but the user has to authenticate to the domain controller. And here's the server port information. So of course he has to connect to the DNS, so that way he can access the domain controller for authentication. He can issue username and password. Okay. So it gives you all the timestamp here. So that gives us a great big picture of what's happening. And the OS that he's using, client ports information. So this gives us a log of what's happening. There's some parameter, and when we look at parameters, it's going to tie back to whether, there's something with certificate, and certificate is used for encryption or authentication reasons or accessing resources. And even when you're using your app for your game with your mobile phone, you have to have a certificate. Who's issuing that certificate? Which system is issuing that? And sometimes you see that right here, right? And then we have the system, what it's doing. There's TLS, there's hash. So it's giving you a little bit more, it's painting the background picture of what's happening, right? What some of the components that tie into each of the sessions. And I don't think we have any keywords or anomalies here in this case. So when you go through this and you want to take a look at it first before you started drilling down on the type of information you wanted to take note of, right? Because sometimes we have to step back and see, well, how many things are we working with? And this is a small capture. Mind you, if somebody actually give you a capture of like hours, you have to look through many lines of different things. So, the movies always make and CSI always make it look very simple, right? Like the instant they, the video magic where it just boom, next scene, you already got the result. But sometimes it takes us weeks, years and months just to go through something like this, right? In a larger scale. So I want you to identify the host that's given to you on the application, how many hosts, and Chris said that he has this many hosts, but he has less files. So how many files are identified? And once you have that, how do I see the number? It gives us it gives it here 54 hosts on mine and 136 files. Okay, so answer the question. All right. And then when you go through the credential tab, we should be able to see the username. Okay. The software gives us the username, which is Matthew Jones. Matthew.Jones. That's what he used to authenticate. Okay, so you write down the username and it asks you, it says, is the password encrypted? Yes, right? We saw that, right? He's issued password there, and they have the challenge here for the LAN manager. So yes. Okay. Now, in the case where it's a group, this is a really clean, simple PCAP. So it's giving you just Matthew Jones. But in the case where you might have many systems, right, like 100 of people authenticated at that time, then we have to really drill down on, this time window, right, and that address. All right. Okay, so we got the user account information. We got the information about the password encryption. Then we're going to go to the host tab and we're going to expand it a little bit more and find a little bit more about his computer. Because when you write out your incident report, you have to be very detail oriented. You have to say that this is the computer, this is its name, this is its IP address, and the MAC address is the physical address of the network interface card for that computer, whether it's a Wi-Fi adapter or an Ethernet adapter, right? It's really tying back down to the physical address of that system, where the IP can always change, right? When people renew IP, right? If they're using dynamic IP, okay? And we want to take a look at the OS. So I'm going to show you how that is. So we're going to go back to the host tab, and we need to identify this system 163 that was targeted. So if you click on the plus sign, it tells you this is the IP address, this is the MAC address, this is in hexadecimal number, this is the NIC vendor. That means that the company that produced that network adapter, the Ethernet adapter, right? And the age, right? It was issued since 2014. So did you know that every company that manufacture network interface card or wireless adapter or even Bluetooth, they have to register it, right? So ASUS is given a set of addresses, and what they do is they use that to issue the MAC addresses for every single network adapter that they created or manufactured, and those goes into the computer, and the computer gets sold to companies or people. And there's a way also that you can search for, to verify that ASUS. Sometimes ASUS will contract out to another company, possibly in China, and they register for that. But Dell, ASUS, IBM, HP, they all get a set of MAC addresses, and they use within that scope, okay, within that range. Okay. Any question? So you're gonna go ahead and write down the information, and then we'll continue. Give me 1 second. Sorry, my dog was scratching on the door. Okay, so it tells us that this is a Windows OS. Now, Some scanners are better than others. Some scanners, it will actually pinpoint which version of Windows that is. It will tell you Windows 7, Windows 10, Windows Server. But in this case, it just tells us that it's a Windows OS. Okay. And it tells us time to live, the ports, how many packets were sent and received from that particular TCP port, right? Sent, received. That's important because it's kind of like saying, you know, what is the how many times it talks and how many times it listens. That system, Matthew's system, right? And then the outgoing session, we saw that there's 147 outgoing sessions, and then you can also click on more detail, right? It gives you the NetBIOS name, the domain that it's connected to. Okay, so all of this can be useful, right? Information would be useful in the sense where if we have to testify, if we have to give, you know, more evidence information, and then again, it ties back to his user account. Okay. Down here, it tells you the version of Windows. That's actually, it tells you Windows 10.0. Okay. So that gives you a little bit more perspective on how to take a look at this. All right. So when you acquire the information of the MAC address, which is the physical address for that adapter, and then the operating system of the host, we can say that it's Windows 10.0. Then we also need to look at the host detail, right? And I show you the host detail. So right below outgoing session, after you click the first plus sign, if you click the plus sign next to the host detail, you get the NetBIOS name. Now in Windows Network, you would always see NetBIOS name because it can resolve the system by its name or by its IP. They always set it up that way. So in the case if the computer hasn't been connected to the internet, it would get a default IP, the PIPA IP, and then it also, you know, and then it's going to look at the computer name. So that way that computer is identified to that particular part of the network. So NetBIOS go back to before we use TCP IP, and that's how we resolve the computer before when we connect is through its name. Okay, so its name is Desktop OF for FEAA. All right. So once we have all the information about the NetBIOS, Kerberos, NTLM, important that you look at the encryption for the authentication, because in some cases you have Trojan that does key logging, and key logging would record the keystroke when the user type in the username and password, and then it would send that out to an external source, and then somebody else in the external source would also log in using that credential. So we would see traffic coming in and also that credential being used again. Okay, so if we expand this case and say, oh yeah, that's a Trojan key, a keylogger Trojan, you would see that, you know, it would send out the encryption information to the other, or the keylogged information to the other user somewhere external in the web, and then that person would try to send traffic in and authenticate to our domain controller using Matthew credential, right? And sometimes you have to investigate that too. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the Files tab. And it tells us that in the Files tab, what we want to do is we want to filter 45.12.4.190. Where do I get this information? Well, we saw that in the alarm system, the log that we saw at the beginning of this document. It tells us that that's the website, that's the IP address that was giving Matthew's system some malicious file, right? So what we wanted to see is what kind of file was it really sending in, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and filter this. Let me see if I can paste it. Okay, and then we would press enter. Voila, there it is.
I think that's the file that I deleted because I can't. It doesn't show up on mine.
Okay. Oh, maybe your anti-malware deleted it. It quarantined it. It's okay. Yeah, don't open this file. So it's okay. It's only a capture. So yeah, Chris, I think your anti-malware took it. It took the .cab and it put it away.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I did see the quarantine. I did disable my thing, but I guess I have to re-download the CPAP then.
Yeah, yeah, the PCAP, yeah, you can re-download it and see, but we see this file now, right? We see that it's coming from this source. It's this size. So if our anti-malware, so that means your anti-malware is doing its job. If your anti-malware is not picking this up, then we need to update the definition for that, and we can report this file. So there are live web pages that you can submit malware, or suspicious malicious file, and then the sandbox will scan it and it will tell you whether it's a malicious file, what will be impacted, and then you can take that, you can report it to your anti-malware company, or sometimes they also get the report from some of the sandboxes and they would update their definition. And that's how, malware, there's only 60% of the malware or less that's actually detected in the wild. Like we're talking about the whole web, right? So essentially, a lot of this is about self-reporting and people actually testing these things. They do have their own engineers and security engineer that test these, but a lot of the times things go undetected. It's kind of like saying that, 60% of the people out there committed murder get caught. It's like that unless the citizen report them. So very much in that sense, in parallel, right? Like that would be the analogy, is that a lot of the time, as security professional, if we see that it's not picking it up, it's our duty to really submit it and report it, so that way we would help other people find the solution to fix the problem. So here we go. It tells us that it's coming from port 80, right? And it's from the HTTP protocol. Then you want to write down the file size, the file name, and then the source port, the timestamp, the destination host address, and the file location. Why do we care about all of that? Well, we wanted to be able to go in and possibly extract it or quarantine it or fix the problem, so that way and then update, our filter, like our firewall and our anti-malware system, to make sure that it blocks that file in the future.
Can we see the miner thingamajiggies? I just copy the timestamp. I can't get the timestamp.
It's yeah, 8/21/2020 at 15:04:24. So it's like 24 seconds after he authenticated. If you look at the previous timestamp, we looked at his authentication, it was like 15:04:01, and then 20 something seconds later, the Trojan shows up. Okay. now if you have infection or you suspect that you have infection when someone else is using your computer, run a capture while this person is using it, see if there's infection coming through, and then you can evaluate it. Okay, all right. And then, so here's the file path. It might be very lengthy. If you pull the tab, just drag it to the right. And after this, you know, after we finish using NetworkMiner, we don't have a need for it, just uninstall it. Or you can always remove the PCAP file if you want to be sure. Okay. Like I said, it's good to really operate all of this on a virtual machine environment versus, you know, the regular system, because in security, you never know. Okay. So we want to be more safe when we do forensic or any kind of security testing. Okay. Now go back to what we were looking, and then what we want to do is we want to calculate the SHA, the hash value, and then we want to take a look at the timestamp for the last write. So what I want to do here is I want to go ahead and right click this, right? And then I want to choose calculate MD5. And all that is it tells me, right, the hash value for MD5, SHA-1, 256, also the path, and then the last write timestamp. Any question? Okay. So again, just right click and then choose calculate, and that will pop up that window and it gives you more details for the hash. Then we're going to filter the session tab now and try to look at possible suspicious IP, because it might not just come from, what if there would be other websites that's also impacting the systems as well. The alarm sounds off from one, but let's see what other suspicious activity that's happening with this computer, right? Because we cannot just, you know, say that there's only one single source is targeting the system. We wanted to see what could possibly be, you know, other things are impacting. So on your NetworkMiner, you're going to go into sessions. And then in here, you simply put 10.8.21.163 to filter that system. And then we click apply. So we now just, you know, filter out all the other ones. We're only looking at 163 Matthew's computer. Okay. So here, what we want to do is we want to look at possible addresses that would be suspicious. And I gave you a hint right here, looking at 45.147.23.132. Okay. So if you scroll down, right, you can take a look at some of these addresses. Okay. And some of this is, you know, sometimes you kind of have to research a little bit about that domain or what is that domain about, right? So we know that this one was malicious from what we've been looking at so far. Okay. Now this just tells us, oh, that's from our network, our DC, so we don't care about that. Live.com is okay. Okay. Edge.net's okay. Pizza Bender's okay. This is okay, except for this guy was malicious. We said that earlier. Skype is okay, you know. And as you go down, you will find like a few that would be suspicious, like this guy. All of a sudden, right? Bravo.casa. Okay, and that's for HTTPS right here. CIS27A club, that's a suspicious one, 89.44.9.186. That doesn't tie anything to our network and our system services. So that could be suspicious. Okay. So you would look for something like that. Let's see if I can find something else. Here's another one, the .186.CYOU. So, and even, you know, so, and then here's this one again, the 186. So multiple from that. So we have to kind of look at that one too. Let me see if there's any other. So what can we do with that? We can set our system to also filter that in the future, right? That would be your recommendation, is to block the suspicious external sources. Nexus Live, that one's okay. Yeah, so I see those couple, 2 or 3. So I would record this guy. Earlier, I already gave you guys one in the document. The .casa here, that's suspicious.
So exactly how would you, just by looking at it, or how, what do we need to be looking for?
You need to be looking for, so to eliminate the ones that are not suspicious, our domain, anything that ties to our domain and our services will not be suspicious. So for example, Pizza Bender, right? No, that's okay, right? What about Skype, right? That's okay. What about, for the geotrafficmanager.net, if they're using that as like like the GPS thing, then yeah, that one's okay. So you have to, so before you really investigate this, you have to be aware of what's Pizza Bender using, right? What kind of services they have. But I normally, when I see something that's short, like a domain that's like the let me see,
Well,
like
are we supposed
this.
to use the port that, are we supposed to look at that first initial port, like 80? Should like be the highlight for the
Well,
malware?
but 443 and port 80, yeah, so you can look at those, the port 80, but look at this, it's coming through 443. That means that it's going through the HTTPS, it's going through the secure. Yeah, so that will be a good ground to start as well. But the port 80 was the malware one. We know that for the fact, because our alarm system gave us that. But the other suspicious activity, right? Because that Trojan, that ICE Trojan, it's impacting like Windows file. This one, it could be that it's also sending out some information to another website, whatever, so we don't know. We have to investigate it a little bit more on what kind of issue that it's gonna cause us now.
Okay.
So you would record the suspicious one. So this one is suspicious, this one is suspicious.
So how about if you type in 7433 for your keyboard, would that one be suspicious?
7433, like you mean into the filter right here? So that is a download from 10. Yeah, it could be. I don't see, so 205.185.216.10. Yes, and what you can do is you can match this with their firewall rule, right? To see if this is one of the acceptable website as well. So you can take a look at the firewall policy that they set up, and then that can also tell you a little bit more about what they allow and what they don't allow. Okay. Yeah, their security system and policy and configuration, that's going to help you too. And normally, it's kind of unfair because you going into this not knowing a little bit more about the company itself, and also, not having what would be the baseline, what would be the minimal acceptable operation. So you're going into it a little bit more blind, but the things that would jump out at us is like the services that would not correlate to that network or that system in general, right? So that should jump out and say that, oh, suspicious doesn't mean that it's malicious. Suspicious just mean that we have to look into it to make sure it's okay or not, right? And if it's not okay, we should block it. If it's okay, then we should, maybe add it to the access list. Okay. Any other question? All right. So you should be able to identify a few of the addresses that could be suspicious. So now the next part is I'm going to talk a little bit about your report. Okay. So once you have everything, once you start taking notes about all the names, the addresses, the timestamp, the possible services, the port, you would put it together. Okay. So in here, what you would do is I put the asterisks for you to fill out. You will put your name, you will put your reporting date and time. Okay. So that way that you can, sometime they would say that this report is created by so-and-so on this day at this time. Okay. But if you wanted to make it like a form that's easy for you, right? If this is your job all the time, then you can just start at making a template and then you can just fill it out. Some company, they have their own template for incidents. So if you get hired by the company, then you would just ask to see if they have that on already. If not, you can create it. So in summary, basically you would state the incident date and time. So put down the date and time, the affected system. So when you name the affected system, you would put the computer name, the type of computer. So you would say Windows desktop, right? And you would say that it was affected by the malware. What kind of incident was happening to that system, basically. Okay. And then the impacted user account, you can put credential use and then Matthew.Jones. Then victim details, we would put the host address. So put down the IP address first, 10.8.21.163, I believe. and then the MAC address that you had written down from the earlier section. And it says, what is the system name? Again, we wanted to go back to the desktop name that they named it. You found that from recording the details from earlier. The third section is the indicator for the compromise. So you wanted to put down that SHA-256 that you recorded. So in the case if you're looking at the infected file, you want to get the hash value. And in our case, we actually were able to obtain 3 hash for that file. You can get the SHA-1, the 256, and the MD5. And these are the encryption protocol for Windows, right? MD5 is, and so all software is created with some kind of hash value, right? And so we can actually investigate further by looking at that hash value and see, okay? And then put down the file name, the file size. And what do I mean by that? We identified that file earlier, right? This right here. So for the host, I filter that, right? And then when I looked at the file, it tells me the path of the file right here. That's the file name. Then I would put down where is that file located, because we wanted to know where it is so that way we can have it quarantined or removed. So for the malicious traffic, we saw that from the alarm screenshot, but we also identified the actual host that sent that file, right? So going back to the 45 dot, I think, let me go back to this. That section, I think you recorded 45.12.4.190. That's your host that you need to identify as a malicious host, malicious traffic. The port, we know that it's port 80, and the protocol for that port is HTTP. And then we identify potential suspicious domain. Those are the domains that we recorded last. That would be, not in our normal baseline. So, and then this is just the reporting piece. Then you would have to add the recommendation, right? So if you really want to be thorough, you can say recommendation. And then you can say, right, like we should quarantine this file type at this location, right? And based on the evaluation, we would take that file and we would submit it to, one of the live website, the sandbox website, and then they can test that file and it will tell you what type of malware that is. And then we would update the definition for our software for anti-malware to make sure that that gets detected in the future. And I included some information about that here. So it says that by practice, you would visit Malware Analysis Sandbox website to submit your hash or malicious file in order to obtain more details about the behavior of the malware. But if it's a common malware, if you just even Google search, it will give you some details about it already. But in the case it's a very unique malware, then you have to send it into the sandbox. They have these live sandbox that will do, and then they have engineers that test it, and it will give you some kind of information. So let's say if you get a rootkit that take out certain system, you have to see if that rootkit fix is available. Sometimes it's not. If you submit it to the sandbox, it will give you some additional details on how you can approach it. And in some cases, there are developers that put up fixes for some rootkit, then you can go through and you have to script or use the code to be able to fix it. Then you would include your reference research information about the discovered, malware in your conclusion, and that would give you a report. So what I did here was I took you through the process on where you would obtain the details about the incident, and you would put together like a document, and then inside that document you would have, additional research information and additional recommendations. Okay. And we're just looking at this from like internal or even as a consultant standpoint, like if you get hired in just to do this. So you have to give the report to the company or, whoever that's authorized for this investigation. Then, if you get contracted, that would wrap up your task. Or if you are internal, then the security, the higher security people, they would make a decision on what they need to do to address the issue. Because you, as an incident responder, you might not necessarily be required to actually go and fix the malware problem. You might have to pass it to the security technician to do that. You're only investigating. Okay. So it all depends on how they clarified that role in the company. Okay, so any question in this? Now, there's so many different type of tools that we would use for different things. So I'm going to try to expose you to various tools that would be available. But, in some cases, it's really to the company. Sometimes they would have certain tool. But as you go through, and if you have experience in specific tool, put that tool on your resume. Even if you learn it in class or if you use it to practice, because when technical people, when they look at your resume, a lot of the times they're going to say, oh, this person knows how to use this, and this, right? So based on this exercise, you should be able to, identify threats in a network traffic incident like a malware, right? And be able to use NetworkMiner to really be able to write up an incident report and possible give recommendations and research information for that malware. Okay. Anything? You have any question for me? No question. All right. I think that's it for our lab. Now, I recommend if you are new to this, right? It's important to kind of learn ports and protocol and some of the services. So if you can't take the course, maybe get a book and like a Network Plus book or a Security Plus book and take a look at some of the details in that. That's going to help you with gaining a little bit more knowledge. And in the field, no matter what area, whether it's forensic or security, you have to be strong in the areas of networking, in the areas of troubleshooting, in the area of, especially the network area. You can't get away from it. Whether you get into the development of security or just, doing, red team or blue team, you still have to be strong in that area. Okay. So I started my career as a networker and as an administrator. So that goes back to my roots. So security is kind of like an added thing for me. It's great because it's just built upon the knowledge and I like it. So, okay. If we have no further questions, if you can type in your full name in the chat. I also pulled the chat participants report, but I just want to make sure that, you know, you're aware that, you know, and then put in your full name. And then I will try to upload this video or link it to the Canvas page and also upload it to YouTube so it can caption, and then I will share that shortly. Okay. I think we finished a little early, about 30 something minutes early. If you don't have any questions, then I wish you a wonderful evening. It's still light outside, so enjoy your evening. Hopefully it's cooler. And then I will see you here next week. For our class, please complete the discussion, right? If you didn't complete the assignment, catch up, and then make sure that you kind of pre-read in the next chapter. So if you have time, take a look at, read the next chapter, and then we'll discuss more on Tuesday. I mean on Wednesday, on Monday. I'm sorry, I keep thinking today's Tuesday and Thursday class. Okay. I wish you have a wonderful evening. Take care, everybody. Have a good night, and I'll see you here Tuesday. Bye. Type in your full name, don't forget. I'll stick around for questions if you have questions.
I did have a bit of a question.
Sure.
Because I know I came in a bit late. I completely got sidetracked and didn't even realize the time of when it was. I was like, oh crap.
That's okay.
But what did I like, as like a summed up version, what did I miss on the first like 30 minutes, or I believe it was like 30.
Basically, I just talk about, you know, the introduction of NetworkMiner, what it is, right? What to use. And then I talk a little bit about, you know, what is a port, you know, and I explained that throughout as well, but I touch on the difference between active and passive network sniffer. So because it's a passive network sniffer, that means that it doesn't tell other hosts that it's scanning, you know, in the background, versus active network sniffer. Active network sniffer calls home, so it advertises to the host that it is a scanner. You know, this system is scanning, right? Like if you're running it on your computer, it will say that, oh, this computer at this address is scanning. So in the case where if you want to evaluate without people knowing, then you want to use passive tools in security. And not all tools are passive. Some of the great tools are active, right? Active scanners. So, you know, and the downside in passive scanner is that some passive scanner people can scan you and you won't know. So that's why I tell all my students that be careful when you use public Wi-Fi, because yeah, they can be using passive scanner and they can look at what you're visiting and what you're doing, and in some of the tools it can actually show, right, the content of the message that you're sending and things like that. So
Gotcha.
yeah, so that was the primary difference, but this one is not a good live scanning tool. I mentioned that there's Wireshark for live scan,
Yeah,
which
I've
is
used
more
Wireshark.
responsive. Yeah,
It's
but this
very
one is,
similar.
yeah, they design it with a similar interface, but this one it's more of like a malware traffic investigation kind of tool. after the fact, right? So you would take a capture file and then you look at it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I went over a little bit of that. And
Mm-hmm.
then I talk a little bit about the installations for different OSs and Security Onion. You know, we would use Security Onion or some kind of isolated system with the virtual machine running. And so for this type of field work, you want to really travel with a couple computers, like 2 laptops, because you don't want one laptop to die and the other one's not, is, you know, so you can use the other one and you would have all the proper tool install on both.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, and then have all the all your software and everything to cloud, and also to your like an external hard drive or something for storage for backup. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's common that you would see a lot of like travel-based job in this area and in security in general. And
Exactly.
then
Yeah.
and
Now,
then
I
I
did
will.
have a
Mhm,
question.
sure.
Actually, two. You were saying that the passive and active scanning are one, like the passive one was background, correct? And is that based off of the type of Wi-Fi you're using, or is that based off the type of program you're running, or both?
It's the type of program you're running, because if it's an active scanner, the active scanner calls home. So it sends, it tells the other system that it is what this is who it is, right? Now on the passive scanner, it's
Mm-hmm.
they both run in the background. On the passive scanner, it doesn't pin back to the system that it's scanning, so you don't know who's scanning.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So,
Yeah,
got
yeah, many tools, if it's invasive, then it's active scanner. A lot of the Kali Linux tools are invasive tools.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when you use those tools to like scan through website, to scan through servers and things, it will
Mm-hmm.
tell the server that this is who it is, and so and on their end, right? So let's say that you are trying to investigate from the outside, the
Yeah.
server end, it would pick that up and it's going to say that, oh, this system is trying to attempt this and this and this and this, and
Oh,
it's
like a
going
black
to,
hat
yeah.
hacker, correct?
Yes, and then it's going to do the reporting. So if you're trying to be discreet and if you're trying to be under the radar, passive is the way to go compared to active or invasive scanning, because yeah, those tools, it calls home and it pinpoint back to who you are, the IP address and the MAC, because ultimately it goes back to your network interface card. Mhm.
Hmm. Now, is there, just out of curiosity, is there like a good happy medium between the two? Like, is there a tool or function that
Well,
program?
only like features. So you will see some
Um,
tools are better in features than other, and depending also on preference of the professional, so, or the company, I should say. Because you know they would purchase the license based on the bells and the whistles, and all of us, we would prefer a tool that gives us a little bit more reporting mechanism, so that way, like, you don't have to really go and manually find things. You know, it's going to give you all the things, most of the things that you need to be able to determine what it is. So some tools are better than other in that. So
oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, it's either one or the other, and you're gonna find that, you know, sometimes it's lacking in this, but it's great in that, and then so so you know, that's how people will be able to sell software. If it has everything, then nobody will want to buy other software. So
Yeah, that's fair enough.
unfortunately, that's the truth. That's
That
why
is
you should
true.
always have like a set of tools. So when we run, so let's say that you use NetworkMiner, and it's okay to use 2 other products, right?
So, like, run like Wireshark,
Yeah.
NetworkMiner, and just have
And
like an
then
asset of tools.
yeah, and then an ether rail and something like that, to kind of, because sometimes you will find that one software will find more information than the other, or it
Hmm.
gives you, you know, vice versa. So you would make up the lack of, and so this is why, like, this particular field is so really difficult to really navigate sometimes, because for a lot of people, because it's so many different things that you're required to know outside of just the basic knowledge and networking and whatnot. But a lot of this comes from experience and also, you know, practice and doing this, right?
Mhm.
Many of the people in security now, they were just IT technician back in the day. So all of us started out in IT technician. Yeah,
Yeah,
everybody did. So,
everyone starts
and
somewhere.
then yeah, and then you build up your experience and knowledge and the tools that you use, and you know, and also the availability in the product too. So now you have so much more than what you would see like 5, 10 years ago. So it's different. Mhm.
Yeah, definitely.
So my advice for you is to keep on learning and looking at resources that are available, and use those resources and compare like different types of tools to see, you know, what would give you, you know, more, and or how you can combine them,
Mhm.
to be able to have a better understanding of what you're working with.
Now, did you, well, two questions onto that, adding onto that part.
Mhm.
During the lesson today, did you have the participants download a link or go onto the website for NetMiner or the NetMiner to at least run a VM and start trying it on their home Wi-Fi's?
Yeah,
Or,
so this is I had a link in the document itself on Security Onion,
mm-hmm.
and you can check out Security Onion and be able to use Security Onion, but I use this on my on one of my laptops because, you know, it's a capture file, and yeah, don't run the .cab file, but you can, if you want to, you can always remove the whole shebang afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then for Chris, he mentioned that his anti-malware picked it up and it blocks it right away. So it
Oh,
took
really?
out that file. Yeah, the .cab, the malicious file that it found. So,
Oh,
but
jeez.
even on the website itself, it tells you that, you know, when you started doing these things, just, you know, have to be mindful that this is security resources. It might tie to malicious things. So you want to use a virtual machine. So I do recommend using a virtual machine.
Or
Um,
using your own like home networks and not like public networks and things like that. Like of sorts
yeah,
that can get you into trouble.
right. And when
Okay.
you and so you want to make sure that you contain this type of particular file. So making sure that you don't, you know, download it on other people's computer and leave it there, and so things like that. But I want you guys to see the real case on how that would work, and you know,
Mhm.
because I can mock up something that's totally fake, and then when you go to the real practice, you're like, what is this? It doesn't even look like what she was telling me.
Yeah, because each what would you call it? Connection is different, or server routing things
Yeah,
like
but at least you have an understanding of like how a Trojan would get in, and
that.
then how it sits in your trap, you know, how you would be able to see that from a network standpoint and how to remedy it. Mhm.
Now, does the Trojan sit in the computer file within itself, or does that actually sit within the Wi-Fi? Uh,
It comes in from a file, but Trojan it masquerades, so it comes in looking like a regular file.
oh, okay. So like it masks itself.
Right.
Uh,
Just like how Trojan horse, the story, right? They
yeah.
hid in the straw horse. So the Trojan is that it would hide inside what you would see sometime as normal file. It could be, you know, something that you would use on your system. It could be an application file that you would see. In this case, it's that .cap file that was coming through. That one is infected. So that's what you see.
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
Mhm.
that makes sense. And then I did have two other questions. Sorry, I don't mean to like bombard
That's
you with
okay. That's
questions.
okay. We still have class time. So what's your other questions?
My other question was from one of my other teachers that I took. Was it was it 26A, the introduction to security, networking security? You're
Uh-huh.
saying that there's a basis of each state laws are different and on what
Yes.
programs and tools you can use, especially if you're trying to do a white hat, ethical hacking for companies
Right.
or black hat, whichever they end up swaying you to do.
Right.
Now, for the general basis in California, since uh, for the time being of living here, what are the programs that I'm allowed to use at least?
So California pertain, so the state doesn't tell you what's allowed or what's not allowed. You have
Hmm.
to select the program that would number one, fulfill the requirement of consumer privacy.
Okay.
California has requirement based on that. Also, there are regulations with the type of industry that you're looking to investigate. So for example, healthcare is different than retailers who uses credit cards, because healthcare, they also have credit card, but they have health records. That's different than, what else? Some
Mm.
type of service company. So every industry would be a little bit different, but ultimately, California rule privacy, regulation on privacy is that, the practice that you use, you
Mhm.
cannot disclose you have to protect customer privacy, the PII.
Oh,
uh,
okay, so you have
Especially,
to
yeah.
consider.
So the tools that you use, a lot of the time, sometimes in the case where if you investigate database that would have database server that would have records of, either health records or, patient information, or it could have, customer credit card and date of birth and social security. Um, as long as the tool that you're using is not disclosing that to another party. So sometime, let's say that you use a free tool and that free tool is sending out that information it's selling that data to the third party, then that becomes a problem. So when you're selecting your tool, you just got to make sure that you're looking at that tool by practice with the regulation for privacy for California. And
Hmm.
also, like, this is not an ethical hacking class. This is a forensic class, which is a
Yeah,
different thing. But
yeah, I
when
definitely understand.
yeah, when you investigate, you always want to get authorization from the company, written authorization.
That's what I was about to
Yeah.
ask,
Yeah. So
because
you
you
have
can't just go
just
on and do it.
right. So you have to make sure that they write it out, somebody signs it, and to authorize. And usually they would authorize a window of time that you can do it.
Oh, so it's a
Um,
window of time of like, say,
yeah,
from January to February or March, whatever.
or 24 hours, or
Oh wow, that's short.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
So if in the case where if they have to take down part of the network for you to investigate, or if they have to remove certain systems for you to investigate, then yeah, they're gonna give you a shorter window of time. But and within that, the security manager and the executive, the people who make the decision, they also, they inquire about what kind of tools, how do you retain information after your contract is over. Sometimes you have to sign the NDA, right? Non-disclosure agreement. Most of the time you do, and not sell their information or even tell other people that you investigated for them. Like I
Okay.
deal I deal with a lot of like security based, like DoD. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right off the bat they say NDA, intellectual property, property agreement, all of these things that you cannot disclose. You can't even say 7-10 years from now who they are and what you do.
Oh wow,
Yeah. Mhm.
that's crazy.
Because and it gets a little hairy. So let's say that you go and you apply for another job, or you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to find another contractor.
Oh,
Well,
you
you
can't even
said,
disclose
oh,
partial of that information.
exactly. Well, you tell
Oh,
them that you
geez.
contracted with so and so, but you cannot disclose like what you did with that. So on your
Oh.
resume, you can only tell that you can only state the type of tools that you use, what you did, but not in the sense where it would disclose any information about them.
Like
So
what they had you do.
yeah, this is the nature of the field, and you kind of have to get used to that, because it's a lot of the things is essential to their operation. and you
Yeah.
don't want to jeopardize their operation, especially when it comes to the military
Oh
and
yeah. No.
government stuff. Yeah. So um, in a way, it's really cool because you have privy to something that nobody else can see, right? And
Exactly.
mhm. So
But
it's
you said to this like field, like, do you mean like this pertaining to this field as in like the forensic filing and investigating, or cybersecurity, or ethical hacking,
security in
or all of it?
general,
Okay.
cybersecurity in general, because computer forensic is part of security.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Gotcha.
yeah, this field as a whole, as cybersecurity, is that. Okay.
Okay, that explains
Yeah.
it. Gotcha.
That's why they care about, your background coming in, what kind of experience you have, and such, because you deal with such sensitive data, right? That critical data that they want to make sure that you are handling it safely. And so when your teacher said about different regulations and stuff like that, that always come back to how you safely handle the data and who is actually seeing that data along with you, right? So
Okay.
is there a sense of privacy and protection, right, in confidentiality, integrity, and in the protection of their data? So
Yeah. After you
um
breach the system, or should you
right,
be able to breach it?
right.
Okay, that makes much more sense now.
Oh, I'm glad I cleared up for you. Who was your teacher in 26A? Was it
It's Skip Berry.
oh yeah, he's great. I work with Skip. He has the CISSP. He used to be the security for our district, our
Okay.
network district. Yeah, and then
Oh, for Marina Valley?
no, for RCCD, right?
Oh,
And
okay, for the entire
yeah,
district.
yeah, and then he stepped away from that, and now he's teaching mainly. But I think he's still
Gotcha.
doing consulting on the side. I'm not sure, but he did do a lot of the security, as far as his work. The recent work I know is with the district.
Yeah, he mentioned it a bit briefly, and then he'd go with the to the conferences, the meetings for the like cybersecurity. What do they call it? DEF CON, I think, or
Yeah,
I
and you
can't
can
remember
go to
exactly.
those too. DEF CON and you can watch DEF CON videos on YouTube. They
Yeah, I
post
haven't
those on
seen
there.
any, but he was talking about him going up to San Francisco last back in early 2020, around like January before the whole coronavirus hit.
Oh yeah, he went to the Cisco conference for the educator,
Yeah,
which is a good
exactly that
one.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then they
he
have
talked about
Black
that.
Hat Conference and other conferences as well. But NetworkMiner is used by, the person who created this. He
Mhm.
actually does a few DEF CON presentation. He also
Really?
presented at Black Hat. So if you
Oh,
look at their website, I think they posted a couple of their videos, but he teaches this seminar at Black Hat Convention. So
that's
so
really
this
cool.
is this is one of the main tool that you would also see in the field as well. So it's good to kind of practice in here, right?
Exactly. And
All
then
right.
I did have a question about the class, the general basis of the class.
Sure.
Barry did mention that, or I think it was Barry or one of my colleagues that I went to go meet up with in that class, that he took this class, 27A, I believe it was, for what is it, digging deep into like, say, you're using your phone or computer and you're deleting files of that sort, and then
Yeah.
uh, he was saying that it deletes the link, and then he was able to
Retrieve it.
exactly, yes.
Yeah, so we'll get into data recovery and stuff down the line. Like when Skip wrote this course, he
Hmm.
has more of the perspective in data recovery than, but the way I look at things is that you have to know more than just data recovery in forensic
Exactly.
now. So we will do this week, and then we'll use other tools. And yeah,
Mhm.
we will have data recovery. You can find all the deleted emails on your phone. You can find, ideally, if I taught this in class, I would have devices for you to really recover from. but because we're COVID-19 impacted,
Yeah, we're doing everything online.
the tools I selected, I gotta make sure that it's available for everybody to use. So
Okay. Oh, like the downloadable links, like
yeah,
for
for
and
OS, for Linux, and then if I choose a phone or some kind of data to recover, I gotta make sure that
Mhm.
people have access to that. So
Okay.
yeah, a little bit more challenging, but I think I can do it.
Okay, that explains why. Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Uh,
And then last question. Sorry, I don't mean to
no
keep you on here.
problem.
But you were talking about in class for discussion on top of the answering the questions of the paper or the screen.
Uh-huh.
Was that like an assignment that is due, or upcoming assignment, or was that just for in-class basis?
So for your assignment, there's a discussion that's posted on Canvas. Let me show
Okay.
you
Oh
where
yeah, in
that's.
Canvas. Okay, I'll check it out. Yeah, because I've been kind of exploring a little bit. That's more or less what took me so long the first time. Is how to get
Yeah,
onto the.
so when you go into Canvas, if you
Mhm.
probably see my screen now.
Yeah, I
So
can
this
check
is
it out.
the first unit, right? And
Got.
then the discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the
What's up?
wrong course.
Yeah.
I said Python. I just finished Python at 4 o'clock, so sorry
Got.
about that. But this is
Oh, that
the
was another thing. I talked about you about I shot you an email to
mhm,
try and get into your Python class for was it the class code 29978, I believe.
uh-huh.
Introduction to Python, I think it was.
Yeah. Did it
I
not
tried.
work?
No, it did work. It was just that I didn't take the prerequisite
Oh,
classes.
yeah.
And with
So,
Edu not being down, I wasn't able to add it on. So I had to
yeah.
kind of find there's a way around it. I just was wondering if you were able to had some insight on how to be able to add that class, because
So
I'm
I talked to the so they finally got back to me at Mission. I wrote them an email yesterday and
okay.
they
Hmm.
said that, oh, send the student to go see the counselor. So if you want to add the course, set up an appointment to see your counselor.
Okay.
So Sylvia Trejo got back to me today regarding one of the student that inquired about the same thing, because you and 3 other students wanted to add the class, but
Gotcha.
because of CIS1A. So she said that
Yeah.
because if you have a record of it that you took a similar course in an accredited institution, like at another college or another school, then
Hmm.
they might be able to credit it. If you don't have that, you can test out of the class, and then the chair, Laura Dunphy and I will have to find uh you know Miss Saloya or somebody to test you out of CIS1A. And CIS1A is Microsoft Office along with Introduction to Computer.
Yeah, it was something that was like it didn't intrigue me, and that's why I bypassed it and I took CIS 5, but I don't know if that has any merits to be able to override CIS 1.
Yeah, they said they don't override it with the CIS5, but what you
I didn't
can
think
do
so.
is, but CIS1A is actually it's transferable to Cal State and UC. So if
Okay.
you if you are interested in transferring, that's one of the CIS courses that actually transfer
Yeah, I
directly
was
into
looking
Cal
to transfer to Cal State San
San
Bernardino for.
Bernardino.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I hear that's one of the best universities, or Cal States in Southern California, for at least IT
Yeah, for
and
cybersecurity.
cybersecurity, I've
Yeah.
heard too.
Well, they have Cal Poly Pomona, not Cal Poly Pomona, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo is offering cybersecurity now,
Oh,
and I
are they?
think
Oh,
Pomona has a program for forensic for this area only. Like they have a
oh,
CIS forensic. Um,
that's pretty cool. I never knew that.
mhm. So you
Hmm.
can inquire about that. They don't really promote it because the person who ran it, I think he's at a different university now, but you can ask
Um,
about it. I know somebody that teaches there, so she mentioned that she teaches forensic classes there for the cybersecurity program there. So
Gotcha. Okay,
okay.
then yeah, I can definitely do that and check that
So
out.
Yeah, no problem. So your discussion is in the Unit 1 module. Make sure that
Oh,
you
you know.
watch the video and then answer the questions, okay?
Okay, and is it, I can submit it all through, is it PDF or JPEG?
No, you just type in
Or,
the reply and then you type it in and
Mhm.
then you would read other people responding because it's a discussion and then you would respond to theirs.
Oh, okay, so it's like a class discussion rather than
Yes,
like individual answering and that nature.
right, right.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's a class discussion.
Okay. And then was there any other assignments that I missed or did not see that are due besides the discussion? Because usually is,
No, so
or not for
so
me.
we only for this week we're doing the
Mhm.
discussion, the
Oh yeah,
in
chapter
class. Yeah,
one.
we did the in class assignment on Tuesday and then the lab today, and that should take care of it.
Okay. Oh, it was the labs? I haven't had a time to check out the labs. What time frame the labs are, but when are they?
The
Is it
lab,
after classes or is it for Tuesdays?
no, lab, yeah, so Thursday is lab and Tuesday is assignment. And the lab,
Gotcha.
that's the network minor that we just did.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that I
Okay.
missed a little bit of time on. Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
So go and complete the steps and answer the questions,
Mhm.
put together your incident report, and then upload that for the lab one.
Okay, then press submit and all right. Sounds good.
Okay. So
All right.
discussion,
Appreciate it.
assignment, and lab. All right.
Okay, all let's do that for this week. All right. Appreciate it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, no problem. Have a wonderful evening.
All right. You too. Bye bye.
Bye.